Greetings, everyone. I am Voivode Maquette, and welcome to our world of darkness, where today I think we're going to start our run-through of the different tales presents Wereworlf the Apocalypse Heart of the Forest. Now, from what I understand, that this is a noveletta kind of situation where you're playing through, you make the choices, but it's all reading. So, I hope everybody enjoys this. I'm interested. I just wanted to give this a shot, and I figured I'd run everybody through it. I have no idea what any of this stuff is. I did get on here once just to look at it, just to see if it was a playthrough game or a novel. But let's go ahead and let's check out options real quick. Ooh. Let's do a little bit of a text delay, because I'll admit I am dyslexic, so blah blah. Paragraph delay, we're gonna go ahead and do that. Window mode, let's leave window mode off. But let's do music a little lower. There we go. I think that's better for me anyway. And yeah, let's go ahead and go back and start a new game. Yes, I'm sure, because I only read the first page anyway. Premonition. Prologue. Okay, so we get a tutorial. This is a game about rage and how it helps us do things that need to be done, as well as things that we later regret. Sometimes both. How do you feel about that? I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm okay with anger when it's useful. Sets our rage to 3. Rage describes your supernatural anger. Be careful when you rage. High rage allows Maya to overcome many obstacles, but also makes her aggressive and hard to control. So I guess I'm playing a female guru named Maya. Okay. Your rage is balanced. So, you're the critical and analytical type. That's okay. There's no right path here. Just your decisions and their consequences. Let's just follow the path and see where it takes us. The forest. The woods are full of stars. They flicker. Come closer. Run away. They want me to chase them. To play hide and seek. I hunt. They dance around the tree trunks, float up on the gusts of wind that shiver through the branches, disappear among the leaves. I let out a howl, eager to run with them. I want everyone to know I'm here, I'm there. Then, they bunch up and fly toward me like an arrow, rushing down. They're soon upon me. But just before the spear of light pierces my breast, they disappear, and the dark of the night returns. I am balanced. In the darkness I feel tangled roots of stories keeping the forest alive, and I hear the spirits asking me to judge the enemy. I open my eyes. And then I wake up. Cold and alone. Confused, I open my eyes. The forest around me is thick, dark, and reeks of decay, to such an extent but it's hard to breathe. I recognize this forest. I know this place. I've been dreaming about this forest since I was a child. The tree trunks, wrapped tightly in dark leaved ivy, are covered in ripples of lichen, where the vines haven't taken hold. The thorny leaves, leafless bushes at their base are overrun with nettles. The fungi radiate with a ghoulish, sickly green light. Dark, sponge-like mushrooms cling to the fallen trees. I try to breathe. I take a deep breath and suddenly realize that it's not the forest that smells so foul, it's me. I look down and I see my hands covered in a dark substance. I'm naked. A sticky, glistening film of liquid is clinging to my skin. I can feel on my face, in my hair, blood. This can't be real. It feels like a dream, but the twigs and stones hurting my feet seem so real. I pinch myself, but I don't wake up. I just see more clearly. Whose blood is this? Did I kill someone? There's a severed head right in front of me. Some choices are hard to make, and they strain your willpower. I wince and touch it. Overcoming my disgust, I gently touch its wet hair and watch as the head topples over, balanced. The face is contorted, the eyes bulging. The mouth opens as though the head were still struggling for air. I balk, but I recognize who it is. And then, eyes open in the darkness. Who is it? I can see their silhouette, shades of jet black against the darkness. They smell of fur and moss and bloodied earth. Massive creatures, some with horns, some with antlers. Their eyes burn like small, fiery windows into hell. I look at them, and something wakes inside me. Sadness. They tell me stories of their lost battles and dying hope, and I sink with sorrow. I sit and listen and cry with them. Then I swear to punish those who have wronged them. In a moment of clarity, I almost understand what the forest wants from me. And then I wake up. Chapter 1. The Arrival. Dreams. Maya, wake up. Hi. High range. I jerked upright, irritated. My neck was stiff, and the movement sent a sudden sharp wave of discomfort through my body. I wasn't in the forest anymore. I was in a bus. The sun streaming through the windows was making it hard to see. The girl next to me was touching my shoulder. Disturbed. What happened? What happened? Overcoming the urge to push her away was hard. Overcoming your rage strains your willpower. She looked at me concerned. You were crying in your sleep. I blinked. The memory of the dream was still there, and the wet stench of decay. I looked outside. I must have bitten my lip, I thought as I ran my tongue over my teeth. The forest outside the window was watching me. The girl next to me shook her head. Thank God, we're almost there. Her name was Anya. We'd met a couple weeks earlier on a orientation day. She is from Norway. A tall, broad-shouldered, calm person who wore her long hair in braids. Somehow, I'd managed to talk to her into this crazy field trip across the land of my ancestors. She seems excited. Anna reached into her backpack and took out 2 apples. I'm really happy we decided to come here, she said. Yeah, I said, offering her some of my cabanossi, I'm assuming? Dried meaty sausage that were so much better than the original Polish ones back in the USA. I was glad Anya had decided to come with me. I had problems keeping friends around and really needed one. I did some searching, she said from over her phone, and this place is amazing. The last primordial forest in Europe. This trip was my idea. Our summer language course was starting in a few weeks, and I'd managed to talk Anya into skipping the tours of concentration camps and old churches, visiting Białowieża National Park with me instead. So far, it's beautiful, she said, her eyes smiling, but why are we here again? Good question. Why were we there? Aha ha. Białowieża is a village in Poland, Polaise province, in the middle of the Biała forest for which it is named. Small village in northeast Poland near the border of Belarus. It was famous for its national park, the very last European bison, and according to a quick web search, occasional tension between far-right troublemakers and the local Belarusian community. The most honest answer would have been because I've been dreaming of this forest since I can remember. But people didn't understand when I said things like that. I looked her in the eyes. I told her everything. Oh, they don't give me the option. Told her as much as I could. Family. It's complicated. Okay. I look her in the eyes. I wanted to see the forest. I heard it was a must. That wasn't technically a lie. When I was a little girl, my grandfather told me stories about an ancient forest full of wonders and the wolves that lived in it. It was all I got from that part of my family before my mom took me, ran away, and cut off contact from my dad. But I remembered the stories well, and I remembered the name of the forest. Puszcza Białowieża. This will always be our home, my grandfather used to say. And I waited for her response. Anna fell silent for a moment. I think it's great that you've come from such a magical place, she smiled. The last ancient forest in Europe, thousands of years old. I wasn't sure if I was fond of that magic, but it was hard to ignore. And that was precisely why I needed to do something, anything, about my future. That damn forest and my weird ass family. I had a clear goal in mind. I wasn't there by mistake. I'd planned this trip for months with a clear goal in mind. I had to face the forest. My dreams, my grandfather's stories, the fact my family was from there. There were just too many coincidences. The forest wanted something from me, and it was time to find out what. I never was one to sit idly by as things happened to me. Ooh. Your willpower dropped to 0. When you lose all your health or willpower, you become impaired. This will make physical tasks if you have 0 health, or social mental tasks if you have 0 willpower harder. It's impossible. That's neat. I like that. So your decisions actually do things. Sorry for my pronunciation. Again, dyslexia really sucks, but I'll muscle through it. Wereworlf looked like an overimposed photo of a village that the contrast turned all the way up. The sun wasn't just shining, it was shouting at the earth. In everything. The trees, the grass, the wooden houses, the fences, they seemed withered. Everything except the shadows. They were sharp, as they were freshly printed from the darkest of inks. And they moved. For a second, I could have sworn they moved. But then I realized it was just a black cat walking down the sidewalk. When it saw me, it stopped in its tracks. I tried to pet it. Here, kitty kitty, I said, squatting and reaching towards the cat. In a flash, it swatted my hand away with its paw, drawing a few drops of blood, and I yelped. Hey, Maya, Anya said, looking at me surprised. Didn't you say your friend would be waiting for us? But he wasn't there, and the cat was still staring at me. Let's go, Anya put on her backpack. I'm tired, and I really, really need to find a toilet. I didn't know what to do. I was too tired and distracted to think clearly. My friend was nowhere in sight. Stormed off. But the meeting was just too important. Let's just wait a little longer, I said. I don't have his number, and we really need to meet up with him. His name is Bartek. I'd met him online while researching Wereworlf. I'm trying. I apologize. The man knew everything there was to know about local history. I asked him to look around for local stories about the forest, and I hope he found something. I really need to pee, Anya said, like I was a 5-year-old, and not a very bright one. I caved. Okay, let's go. I grabbed my backpack and stormed off. Angry at Bartek, Anna's tiny bladder, and that creepy cat. Bed and breakfast. Biowovizia had a few hotels and hostels, but the preferred form of accommodations was a bed and breakfast. That's where we stayed. I found one that was nice, clean, and that had good reviews. We had a room on the second floor with a huge window with a great view of the forest. We dropped off our stuff, freshened up a bit. Maybe we should have waited for your friend, Anya asked, concerned. I shrugged. I'll find him sooner or later. Before you go, check out your character sheet. Look for it at the upper right hand corner of the screen. You can find a load of useful info about Maya, her background, personality, goals, and so on there. You can also check on your friends and who your enemies are. Okay, so I'm assuming this is the character sheet. Yep. Alright, so my name is Maya Borodich. I'm 24, I'm a student, and I'm American. My cunning is very low. I have an impaired willpower. I need to understand the power to regain my willpower. Okay. So I got to try to find out more about the forest. Anya's sympathetic. Ooh. Maya's friend from the university. She came from Norway. Tall, calm person who wore hair and braids. Activist family. It's complicated. Okay. This is very, very interesting. And we're at the summer solstice, so that's very, very cool. Alright. But I had other things on my mind. The lay of the land. I had a clear goal in mind. The forest was calling me, and I was ready to answer the call. Anya went with you. Interesting. I'm curious about my forest. Into the woods. It was dark in the woods. Dark, humid, and chilly. The leaves didn't let through a lot of sunlight. Daniel looked at Anya. Daniel looked at Anya and me over his shoulder. How do you like her? We'd met 20 minutes earlier. Anya had Googled local guides, and he was apparently the best person to go to if you wanted to see the forest. So I found him, and now here we were. Wasn't sure whom he meant. Do you mean the forest? I asked. Polish was a strange language that gave the most unexpected genders to objects and ideas. I mean... Okay, it's not giving me an option on that one. So I will try. Puseskas. He gestured around us. The words sounded like he was rustling. Like the rustling in the wind. Pushka. Pushka is the right word. Not forest. Forests are like fields or orchards. Cultivated. He spat as he said it. And Pushka, she's older than even the concept of fields. He was using the word as though it was a name. I looked at the Pushkas again. I looked around with fresh eyes. I felt as though I'd entered an ancient battlefield. Gigantic trees were locked in centuries-long wars for a place in the sun. As the trunks of fallen foes decomposed slowly at their feet, Young plants and colorful mushrooms were fighting their own battles over the rotting remains. The trees that still lived stretched towards the sky like columns, holding up the vaulted canopy, which blocked out all of the few rays of the sun. Something moved in the leaves, and I fought the urge to chase it. I loved what I saw. There should be more places like this, I said earnestly. Or more of this place. Daniel lifted his head and looked me right in the eyes. Yes, you're right, he said with a serious expression. He was a strange guy, slender but muscular, not the CrossFit type. It was more the kind of strength you get from working all day long in the open. His skin was weather-beaten and bronzed by the sun, like tanned leather, and he moved in a very deliberate way. But his fingers were slim and delicate, and his eyes were the strangest shade of yellow-green. Then I remembered why I was there. I told him that I dreamed about the forest. There's a special reason I'm interested in the forest, I admitted. I'm not from here, I continued, but I think something secret connects me to this place. I dream about the forest a lot. Daniel stopped abruptly and turned to me, watching me for a while. His nostrils flared as though he were tasting the air. Yes. His face broke into a smile. I think our families might have known each other many winters past. Pushka still remembers. Come on. He started walking. I know exactly what you need to see. That piqued my interest. Woo! Got my willpower back. Progressed in my goal. So, I was right. There was something hidden in my family's past, and it seemed to have a lot to do with the forest. Every time you learn or do something significant that brings you closer to your goal, you gain willpower. Woot! With every step, I was getting closer to solving the mystery, so I followed him. At the crossroads. We've have to choose a path, he said. There's the old wolf den, or I could show you the burrows first, or a clearing that some folks call a place of power. I'm playing pretty much as me here, so I'm gonna go ahead and go with Wolf Den. That catches my interest more. Just one small thing. We started walking, but after a few steps he stopped abruptly, like he'd remembered something. Then he turned to me. Could you do me a favor, please? He asked. It depends. I don't know, I said slowly. Why don't you tell me what you want first? He ran his hand through the moss of a dead tree trunk, smelled his fingers, and then reached into his pocket. He took out a small stone. Too small to be a weapon. Something personal? I'm going to say something personal. It looked like one of those stones you treasure as a child and then grow out of. But he looked at the pebble as though it were still a treasure. The game tracks your decisions on how Maya approaches problems. They will accumulate and gradually reveal what kind of person she is, deep in her heart. The story changes to reflect Maya's personality. I would like you to take this stone. He held out his open hand toward me. And, and throw it in the direction you think we should go. I did what he asks. Okay, I said, reaching for the stone. I took the stone, closed my hand around it. Be careful, whispered Anya. I'm interested. It was warm, and I could feel it pulsating. I closed my eyes and thought about the wolf den, trying to imagine that place. I smelled fur. I felt warmth. I was safe. I throw the stone. I felt my hand rising entirely on its own, and then throwing the stone as far as I could. It was a good throw. The stone flew in a long arc over the bushes and disappeared without a trace in the dense undergrowth. Great, Daniel sighed. I was asking for that, wasn't I? What just happened? I was confused. You were accepted, he answered with a faint smile before he turned to head deeper into the forest. The old den. The first thing I noticed when we stopped was a pine tree. A pine tree I knew. I remembered it. Small, twisted, crooked, and immensely powerful. Every bend of every branch had a story to tell. It's majestic, I thought suddenly. Months before that, when I decided to come to Poland, I dreamed of that tree. I was sure of it. Just like I was sure that under its roots, I'd find a burrow. And a few feet away, another one, like two dark eyes, gazing at me as I approached. Daniel passed me and approached the tree. He pressed his cheek against the trunk. Hello, he said quietly. I looked around, but we were the only people in there, so I remained silent. A sudden gust of wind threw a cloud of dust in my face and into my eyes. This is the den, announced Daniel. It's abandoned, of course, but it's still worth seeing. What happened? I asked. Humans happened, Daniel sighed. He sat under the tree, leaning back up against it. It was a hot spring morning when they found this den. No one knows who the men were, even though it was only one human generation ago. There were 6 cubs under here, the roots of the tree. He stopped stuttering and seemed to enjoy telling the story. And I enjoyed listening to it. There was something calming in his voice and the way he talked. His slow gestures and wistful eyes made me feel as though I was the cubs on that hot spring morning. I don't think they wanted to hurt the wolves, he continued. They probably thought they'd been abandoned. That's why they took the cubs with them. Humans have this instinct that makes them try to befriend everything, especially if it's dangerous. I don't like people. You mean enslave, I answered sharply. Pulling something from the world and forcing it to work for us. I hated it, but was how it seemed to be. I'm not saying it's always works out, but the intention is good. And I believe the men who kidnapped the wolves wanted to do something kind, he continued. Anyway, they took them. Out of the 6, 2 lived to see the cold summer that year. The mother wolf used to come to the farm where they were and howl. People went gray if they heard her. I knew that howl. And suddenly I heard that howl. I knew exactly how it sounded, and I felt despair and longing gnawing at my soul, and I remembered how the cubs had reacted. They threw themselves out the door. Every time she came, we threw ourselves out the door, biting, trying to break free, to escape. Maya, are you okay? Anya asked, putting her hand on my shoulder. I just feel for the cubs. I know a little about divided families myself. Oh. Yeah, that usually ended the conversation. Daniel sighed, looked at the tree and the burrow. The cubs that survived were sold to some people in Kainufka. But after a while, both of them ended up back in Wereworlf with the scientists. They have a station in the national park. One of the wolves, Kazan, was a celebrity of sorts. If you saw any wolf photos from here, they were probably of Kazan. He was even on postcards. The men should have left the cubs where they belonged, I said, exasperated. Why did they interfere? They wanted to be kind, Daniel repeated. You can't condemn kindness. There was a slight gust of wind, and the trees creaked. I remembered that sound from my dreams as well, a sound that made me feel safe. Will the wolves come back here? I looked at the empty den. Daniel frowned. No, they won't. This place is cursed for them. He looked at the burrow for a long time. This place is my friend. So I tried to keep it important and respected. I think it's my mission, you know? I think I understand. The forest had a way of sending people on missions. Daniel looked at the tree one last time. Goodbye, he said. Goodbye, I repeated. And we left. Between the trees. The forest was alive around us, vigilant but not alarmed by our presence. I kept thinking about the stolen cubs. Burrows. The dead hills. The trail soon disappeared. Sometimes we walked along a barely visible path made by some animals. Sometimes we followed the streams or the gullies, but most of our trek we walked through the dense undergrowth. I was getting impatient. The sun was barely noticeable through the dense canopy. I had no idea which direction we were going, and I was starting to doubt if Daniel did. It was a pleasant walk. It was a pleasant walk. There was always a path through the brambles. The ground was even, and the branches stayed out of our way. I almost felt like the forest wanted us to find the way. I watched the efficient and deliberate way Daniel moved and tried to guess his background. Why had he become a guide? Where are you from? I asked the obvious question. From around here. He made a vague gesture. Are you a professional guide? That's what I do for a living. He wasn't very talkative. Leave him be, whispered Anya. Then it hit me. Suddenly, it all came together and I realized what was so unusual about him. The way he moved. It was so natural, so effortless. No one who'd spent their childhood sitting all day at school or in front of the screen could move like that, or move that way. Who are you, Daniel? I asked, bewildered. Were you raised by wolves or what? He looked at me straight in the eye, his irises and mesmerizing yellow-green. Yes, I was, he said, with a poker face. Then he winked. Anya smiled uneasily. Continued in silence. We'd been walking for a while when I noticed that Daniel's steps had become slower. He was looking around more often and had hunched slightly. I just enjoyed the movement. I sat down on a fallen tree trunk, looked around, and just enjoyed the afternoon. After a moment, Daniel shook his head. They're tricky to find sometimes, he mumbled. Be quiet for a moment, please. That was what I felt it. Ash in my mouth. Smell of smoke and wet soil. And a pool. I knew where to go. I think I know where to go, I said, surprised. He tilted his head. Oh, okay, let's check it out. I pointed to the barely visible path to my left under the dying tree. He followed me, and I followed my feet, knowing exactly where they should go. Under the crooked tree, past the dead tree trunk and the sponge-like mushrooms, across the patch of wet, dark green moss, all the way to a place that didn't look much different than any other parts of the forest until I noticed the mounds. There was something about the flattened hills that drew my full attention. A memory stirred in my mind. No, it wasn't a memory. It was a feeling anchored to my chest, akin to the taste of ash in my mouth and the smell of smoke. Longing, sadness, resignation. But there was more. A sense of sacredness. It filled me with a calm excitement. And when I closed my eyes, I saw a fire burning in the darkness. Voices. The village was burning, and dead bodies were scattered among the flaming buildings. My hands were dripping with blood. The dying crawled towards me. Some in ancient Roman armor, some in rags, some in uniforms from the world wars, some in modern camo. Why? They asked, spitting blood and broken teeth. Why do you keep killing us? So the forest could live. They died so the forest could continue living. When I opened my eyes, Daniel was watching me. You were somewhere else, he said. You said you had family here. I heard that my father's family came from here. I nodded. I don't know much about them, though, he sighed. I don't think you should be here, he said, tersely. You're not ready. He knew something. Why? What do you know? I wasn't letting it go. About you, not much. But I know the Pushta. The pass is close here. His eyes were worried as he looked at me. And if the Pushta calls you, it's wise to listen. But it's not wise to get lost in the voices. Come. On the way back, I was lost in my thoughts. The voices in the vision knew what I had to do. It's almost as though it was expected of me. Daniel said that the Pushka had called me. Was the vision showing me what the forest needed? I smiled. A bigger picture was finally starting to come to light. The Pushka wanted me to fight. The walk back was uneventful. In the shadows, I felt a little tired. The shadows of the enormous trees cooled the sweat to my skin. The taste of ash lingered in my mouth. Let's go to the places of power. A buzzing in my ears. I started with the hair on the It started with the hair on the back of my hands rising. The air around me seemed brighter, lighter. The leaves and the trees' trunks turned yellow, and my skin started to prickle. I realized that I couldn't hear anything except for the low buzzing that was filling my ears. I tripped and lost balance for a second, and when I caught myself, everything around me was swaying, dissolving into the buzzing. I had to do something, snap out of it. Clear my mind. I closed my eyes and tried to focus. This weird sensation was coming from within, after all. I just needed to find its source. But I wasn't the source, I realized. I was only resonating. The source was somewhere else. Open my eyes. I opened my eyes, and when I did, I was looking straight at a clearing. I could see the silhouette of a person between the trees. They were moving slowly, deliberately, and the movement I noticed them, I felt the buzzing slow down. I approached. The clearing was a plateau between huge boulders. There were double tree-trunked trees between the rocks, and an angular wooden construction that stuck out of the ground like a sore thumb. There was a bike leaning on it, But, more importantly, there was a man, and he was moving in the most beautiful, harmonious way I'd ever seen. I was hypnotized. I couldn't stop looking at the way he moved, the way his muscles danced under his tan skin. This man knew his body. He knew how to use it. It was his tool, his weapon. The energy that had been filling me earlier took form. It was flowing in rhythm, with the steps, with the flow of his hands. The words came out of my mouth seemingly without my knowing. What did you do? He smiled. It's a little bit complicated. He stretched his hands toward me. I'm Cornell, he said, with his hard German accent. Shouldn't you be on the logging site? Daniel asked him after I introduced myself. I needed to center myself, he answered. The others are still there. Don't worry. Wait, logging here? I couldn't believe my ears. He smiled bitterly. Yes, logging here. That's why I needed to calm down. This place is special, Daniel said. Some people call it a place of power, as I told you. And they have a good reason to, Cornell added. Look around you. So I looked. It was a clearing filled with light. I could see Cornell's traces, a beautiful pattern on the ground. But there was one thing that caught my attention more than anything else. Why the fuck is this there? I asked, pointing at an observation tower. I thought this was supposed to be a forest untouched by humans. People believe this was a place of worship thousands of years ago. Hence, the fruit trees, the stone circle, and now the tower. And indeed, there's a lot of energy in this place. You felt it, didn't you? Yeah, I felt it, I said without enthusiasm. The Pushka is wounded and in pain, and it calls out in rage to anyone who can hear it. Here this call is louder. You see? The logging. His eyes darkened. His slaughter. Anya gasped quietly. Every priceless thing can be destroyed by greed. Logging is illegal, of course, but illegal is sometimes just a way of saying a bit more expensive, but still profitable, especially for huge corporations. The forest is hurt. The wound is getting bigger, as is its desperation. I clenched my fist. Someone should sabotage the whole thing. You can't log without tools, and buying new tools will get unprofitable at some point. Cornell regarded me for a moment with a faint smile. You have a connection with this forest, don't you? You should come to the logging site and meet everyone. Absolutely, Anya agreed eagerly. It could be the next step. And even if it wasn't, something had to be fucking done about the logging situation. Yeah, I'll come, I smiled. Great. You will understand what you need to do. He jumped suddenly and looked at the wooden tower and the bike I'd noticed earlier. Dice Fable. It's getting restless, he said. And, as Daniel pointed out, I should be at the logging site, setting up the protest. Swabble? What's a swabble? I asked, confused. He named his bike Swallow. Daniel explained. He loves it very much. Cornell grinned. Oh, I do. Nice to meet you, Maya. All I want to do is get out of there. The moment he disappeared, the buzzing came back. It wasn't as strong as it was before, but it was there. All I wanted to do was get out of there. We went through the forest. We went through the greenery, and the buzzing in my ears slowly deceased. Serendipity. As we walked through town, Anya nudged me and pointed to the tall, broad-shouldered, freckled guy standing at the bus stop we had lost, with a lost expression on his face. I remembered his face from the picture on the social media. It was the friend who stood me up earlier. I'm pissed. Sorry. Bartek, I snapped irritatedly. You stood me up, not cool. Maya, what are you doing here? He blurted. He was surprised when he saw me. I was sure you'd missed the bus. We started walking and talking. His accent was broad and Eastern European. Luckily, he loved talking about his home, so when I flooded him with questions, he kindly obliged. He talked about how the village had become a tourist destination, how the logging business moved to a nearby town, how the trains had stopped coming, and the local station had been turned into a hotel for wealthy foreign hunters. The dozens and dozens of bison statues scattered around the village watched us indifferently. We walked along the only street in the village, nearing the center, if you could call it that. Every house had a garden, and air was dense with fragrance of flowers. I took a deep breath. So, did you find anything linking me to the forest, I asked? Bartek shook his head. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Sorry. He was avoiding my eyes. A trickle of sweat ran down his temple. He was lying straight to my face. What the fuck, man? I threw my arms in the air. You wrote to me a few days ago that you had something. But he just clammed up. You know what? I think you should stop it. I stopped. I'm getting pissed. I turned to Bartek, grabbed his shirt, and pushed him hard against a fence. I'd always been strong, and anger made me even stronger. His feet lost contact with the ground. I heard Anya grasp. A scream in his face. I traveled 300 miles in a fucking bus without fucking AC, I shouted. A few flecks of spit hitting him in the chin. I did it because you said you'd found something. My arms got tired and I dropped him. I politely asked again. So, would you kindly tell me what you found? Bartek scrambled to his feet, pale and terrified. Well, He brushed his forehead with the back of his hand. I did ask. I started with the old people here. I told them that my friend was from the States and was looking for her roots and wanted to know about the place her family came from. You know the drill. At first, people were very, receptive. I waited for the other shoe to drop. And then I mentioned your name. He shook his head. And Bartek, no dramatic pauses, please, I urged him. The tension is killing me. One of the old men here told me to go to hell. The other spat on the ground. His wife crossed herself. For a moment, he looked younger and smaller. And then my own grandmother told me to stop asking. She said something else as well. Tensed up. What? I asked. She told me to pray for you. Suddenly, the sweet, golden afternoon wasn't so sweet and golden anymore. That perked my interest. I knew there was something weird and twisted connecting me and my family to that forest. I could feel a shiver run down my spine. We walked in silence, but my mind was in overdrive. People didn't want to talk, and that could only mean one thing. I was right on track. My pulse quickened, and I tensed up like a hound that smelled blood. I was right on the track. I was on the right track. I needed to gather my thoughts. It was a long day, and a lot had happened. I was really tired. It was good to meet you in person, I said, but I need to be going. All this traveling and walking around the forest was exhausting, I smiled. Sure, where are you staying? It turned out we were going the same way, of course. We went back to the B&B. The first evening. The B&B was quaint. I left Anya and Bartek outside. They were lost in conversation and didn't even notice that I was gone. When I got out of the shower, Anya was back smiling and a little flustered. What a day, she smiled. So, what do you think? I made a quick mental inventory of everything that had happened that day. They're cutting down the forest. I can't believe they're logging here. I shook my head. Isn't the forest on a UNESCO list or something? Yeah, I know. I want to check out this protest people we're talking about. Maybe we can go tomorrow. I felt this strange energy, the places of power, before we met Cornell. It still freaks me out. Cornell seemed cool, though, Anya answered. And he seemed to really understand what you're going through. The wolf cubs that were kidnapped and died in captivity. I sighed. The story stayed with me, you know? She put her hand on my arm. Divided family, huh? So called Maya. Let's go with all of it. Something strange happened when I was visiting the old burrows. I said and instantly regretted it. Never mind, it's probably just dehydrated. Yeah, it was probably it. but you looked weird. She laughed nervously. A lot of things today and were weird if you did think about it. Talking anymore. You know what? I'm seriously tired. Let's call it a day, shall we? So, soon, we were both in our beds, ready to sleep. I was tired, sure, but also excited. And excitement isn't the best for sleep. I lay there for a while thinking about everything that had happened and might happen next. The wind from the open window lapped over my skin as I watched the silver rectangle painted on the wall by the moonlight. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw tangled branches. The stone Daniel asked me to throw, the leaves. I came here with one question, and now I had so many. I felt I was closer to getting my answers. I felt that the answers I was looking for were within my reach. I should go and see the logging protest, find Cornell and ask him to talk. After a long while, all these thoughts became blurry and they slowly started to turn into pictures, sounds, colors. I drifted off. A night in the woods. In a big city, old men sit in leather chairs, lazily enjoying their ever-growing wealth. They watch Wereworlf on flickering screens. They watch me. I feel the excitement rising, deep within my stomach, then throughout my whole body. I am a razor-sharp knife. I am a sword. I am a gun waiting to be fired. I'm asleep for now, but soon someone will use me, and I can't wait. I feel a pull. I feel a pull, and I surrender to it. I am pointed towards a clearing. There are piles of fresh corpses of people who tried too young, of people who died too young, skinned and mutilated. Their loved ones stand around them grieving, unable to do anything, waiting, and suddenly they're just tree trunks. I howl. I look at the moon, and I howl. The trees are dead, and I'm the only one left to sing their story. There's a stench in the air, like meat, rotting in acid, but somehow worse. I see a monstrous army. Their mandibles are whirling chainsaws. Their long metal arms are wrapped with black pipes that look like the glistening intestines. Their smell is vile. They wait, unmoving. I go to the dead trees, kneel next to them. Words come to me in a language that I don't remember, but that I know. Words about revenge and death and sacrifice. And then my voice tells me to look at the sky. There between the stars, two shapes circle each other. An old, sad wolf with gray hair and a white weasel. They keep their eyes on one another as they continue their dance, suspicious but not hostile. We need to fight the enemy, the awful rotting stench. I know that much. But how can we do that when we don't trust each other? They stop. They look at me and the clearing. I gaze at them, just like they gaze at me. Now the three of us are all measuring each other. They descend on the opposite sides of the clearing. One by one, other shadows join them. I stand in the middle of it all. And I believe that we will stop there with that chapter. We will continue chapter 2, logging, next time. I hope that you enjoyed this reading of Heart of the Forest, and we will, like I said, continue along soon. I am Voivode Maquette. This is Our World of Darkness, and thank you for joining me with our first ever dive into the world of Wereworlf the Apocalypse. Good evening.